Before an audience that included many people who had fought in Vietnam, as well as many who had opposed the war, Country Joe McDonald sang his famous anti-war anthem.
And it's 5, 6, 7, open up the pearly gates. Well, ain't no time to wonder why we're all gonna die.
And the unique thing about the song is it doesn't blame soldiers for war. I always say blaming soldiers for war is like blaming firefighters for fire.
Among veterans, there are mixed feelings about whether the war was justified and winnable, but they all feel it drastically changed their lives. Among them is Kerry, who was wounded in 1969.
That's hard to think that we lost it because we just didn't want to win it. And I still don't quite understand why we didn't want to win it.
That sentiment is even stronger among former South Vietnamese soldiers like ex-Captain Michael Doe.
President Nixon promised that he will help any means, any way to save Vietnam if the communists attack Vietnam again.
But Americans had grown weary of the war, and government documents show that policymakers knew it was unwinnable, says author Robert Schenkkan.
The historical record is pretty substantial by this point, that the idea of a military victory, given the circumstances, the political, social circumstances of the time, was not in the cards.
The chief architect of U.S. policy at that time was Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, who many critics say committed war crimes by advising President Richard Nixon to bomb Vietnam's neutral neighbor, Cambodia. Kissinger says the bombing was justified by the 4 divisions the North Vietnamese sent into Cambodia.
In the 3rd week of the Nixon presidency, they started an offensive in which every week up to 500 Americans were killed.
The Vietnam summit was held in the presidential library of the man who escalated U.S. involvement in the country, Lyndon Baines Johnson. His daughter, Luci Baines Johnson, says it's now time for healing and understanding.
Maybe all of us were really trying with all that was in us to do the right thing for our country.
That healing process is also symbolized by the coming Obama visit to Vietnam, says Secretary of State John Kerry, a Vietnam War veteran who later opposed the war. He said U.S.-Vietnam relations serve as a model of how old enemies can come together. Greg Flakus, VOA News, Houston.